Hi,
Hello.
Chris. How are you?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay,
perfectly.
great. I'm just holding my phone in front of me like an amateur, but yeah, you've probably got yours propped up or some other complicated setup.
I have a selfie stick with a gorilla pod, and it's sort of very precarious.
Oh, well, it looks very professional.
Oh,
So that's
thank
good.
you. Thank you. I've got like lights and everything.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Well,
I
no
see.
such. I've got some books behind me but that's as good as it gets here.
Well, the books are probably quite a good thing to have in the background.
I guess. Yeah, I guess.
If you get stuck on anything, we can just reference.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
How are you
That's what they're
doing?
there for. Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, good. Yeah, I just moved house recently, and I'm nicely settled in now. The books being on shelves is an important part of that. I have a desk now and an internet connection, so yeah, okay, thank you. And how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Just like it's like 45 degrees here. It's like, oh.
Well, okay, yeah, okay. So that's probably too hot. It's gone a bit too cold here.
Ah,
So
okay.
somewhere in
Even
between here
well,
and South Africa, I guess, is the perfect place to be at the moment.
I was thinking Egypt, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
So, see,
one day we'll both be there at some point.
exactly. Like I keep every time I'm there, I email Salima. I'm like, "Hi, I'm in town," and she always happens to be somewhere else. So maybe
Uh,
one day we'll be there at the same time.
right. Yeah. Okay. We'll make this work eventually.
I see we got a couple people on. I see Colleen Darnell is on. Hi, Colleen.
Oh, hi, Colleen. Hi. Wow.
Yeah, so basically, I was just telling everyone that you've just released a book and all of that, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I thought before we did that, um, it would be nice if people got to know you a little better. Because
Okay.
I mean, we see you on TV, we see you online, but I don't think people actually know much about you.
Maybe not. Yeah, maybe not. Well, what would you like
So,
to know?
well, I would like to know. How did you actually become interested in history? Was Egyptology always your passion, or did it sort of happen by accident?
That's a good question. I I know that I was interested in history from a long time ago, from when I was a kid. I guess what I'm saying is from a young enough age that I can't really remember when it started. I was lucky that I was brought up in a household that had an interest in history. Both my parents did, and I guess history of one kind or another was a sort of a part of school holidays and that sort of thing. I can remember being in places like a stone circle in the south of England, and kind of Roman sites that we might visit here and there. Um, I I also went to Israel when I was 11 on a family holiday, which was a pretty unusual place for a family holiday. My dad is a
What
priest.
were you guys doing there? I
Well, so
mean,
my dad is a minister in the Anglican Church in the UK, in the UK, the English um, church, and
yeah,
he was leading a tour of sites connected with the biblical narrative in Israel. So I mean, of course, I wanted to go to Disney World in Florida, like all the other kids at school, or Magaluf or whatever. But actually, going to Israel was kind of amazing. It was a very unusual thing, and it gave me my first taste of the Middle East in some sense, and the desert and that kind of climate, and also some sense of ancient monuments from that part of the world. I'm talking in very general terms here. Um, I know as well that by the time I came to go to university, I was a bit of a drifter at school at that point, and I was much more interested in rock music and football than anything
yeah.
else. But also, I was kind of uh, not. I wasn't really very good at being bad. I was quite a good kid, really. So
So
I
the rock music, what were you involved there? Did you like play guitar, drums? What was that?
I did. I'd actually played both those. Yeah, I was in some terrible bands at school, and afterwards as well, actually. So for a while there, I was sort of kidding myself that I was, you know, I was more interested in rock music than anything else. But at the same time, you know, I was keeping my hand in with my studies like a good kid. And although I sort of drifted to university somewhat, I chose ancient history and archaeology because it was what interested me. And when I got there, actually having not expected to get into a good university because I thought I was going to fluff my exams, but having sort of lucked my way in, I realized when I was there, oh, right, this is what I want to do. I just loved it from day one, and decided to take it seriously and see how far I could take it. And I sort of feel as though I'm still in that same position. I'm taking this as far as I can, half expecting that at some point I'm going to have to go and get a real job. But you know, this is like 25 years later, and I'm still lucky enough to be doing it. So yeah, so there we go.
Well, you know, that's so interesting that you like you said, now you feel like you need to get a real job. But I pretty much think you have a real job in Egyptology. You're quite lucky in that respect.
Yeah, I shouldn't be. I don't mean to imply any disrespect, of course, to anybody who's working in the field. I only mean that in the sense that I really enjoy what I do, and so it doesn't really feel like work in that sense. And you know, these days I have had permanent employment in the field. I used to work for the Egypt Exploration Society for a long time, but I left to become freelance to try and really concentrate on doing Egyptology rather than administration or management or any of the other things that, you know, you can get dragged into. And that's what I'm doing. But it's a slightly more precarious lifestyle now that I'm freelance. You know, I'm constantly on the lookout for the next bit of work. And you know, having said that, you know, I've been doing this for almost 4 years now, and I'm making it work to the extent that I can just about pay the bills. But the most important thing for me is that I really enjoy it. So yeah, long may it continue.
Well, you know, I think if you have a job that you actually enjoy, I think every day shouldn't feel like work. It should be something you enjoy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was that's the way I've always looked at it, really. I obviously you don't go into Egyptology for the money. There are much better ways of earning megabucks if that's what you want to do. I did it because I enjoyed it, and actually, you know, it wouldn't be the thing that I would want to do anymore if I wasn't enjoying it. So, and I think it's kind of important to be flexible in that regard as well. There have been times when in my working life when Egyptology has taken me in a direction that, for one reason or another, didn't make me completely happy, and you know, and I made the change on that basis, and I would happily, as it were, you know, make another change of direction if what I was doing wasn't enjoyable. So I do, yeah, I'm doing it because I love it. I really do. Yeah, I feel very happy doing what I do.
Did you face any obstacles from other Egyptologists, institutions when you started out?
No, not really. I mean, I can't tell you that absolutely everybody I've come across in the field in the last 25 years has been somebody that I've instantly wanted to be best friends with. But no, I don't think I've ever really come across any sort of individual situation or person where I've felt like I'm being held back. I can think of lots more examples where colleagues have gone out of their way to be helpful and supportive and encouraging. So, you know, my supervisors at university in Birmingham, University of Birmingham in the Midlands in the UK, were good teachers, good academics, good scholars. This is, by the way, this is Dr. Anthony Leahy and Dr. Lisa Montagno Leahy, his then wife. They were encouraging. They were good teachers. I think if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here doing this. But they were also they were also really good. They kind of cared about, you know, a person's life as well as, you know, just their academic work. And there was a point when I was going to go on and do a PhD straight away, and Lisa sat me down once and said, "You shouldn't do this. Go away. Take a master's degree. Go away. Think about your life. Think about what you want to do. You're still very young. Try and get some work experience, if that's what you want to do. And if after a year you still want to do a PhD, come back. We'd be very happy to have you. But think about it. You know, don't just go hurtling into it." And that was great advice. And they helped me find work experience. They helped me to get my first work in Egypt. And I can think of, you know, I won't bore you with all the stories, but I can think of a few other examples of occasions like that when people have just been really, really generous spirited and really helpful. I have actually, I'm going to tell you one other story. I have a letter which was sent to me by Kenneth Kitchen, the great legendary scholar of the later New Kingdom and the Third Intermediate period. And he and I got to be friends for various reasons. But anyway, mostly through the EES. And there was a time when I was just coming to the end of my PhD and I was really struggling with it. And there were times when I was going to give up, actually. You know, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go through with it, and I was worried that I was going to make a mess of it. And anyway, I wasn't in a very good place, and but I decided I was going to try and finish, and I took some time away from the EES to just get it done. And he called the office to speak to me while I was away. And a friend, so a colleague of mine, he said, well, no, Chris is on leave, actually. And so he wrote me a letter at my home just to say how pleased he was that I was carrying on to finish my PhD. And he said, but just remember, whatever happens at the end of this, whether you get it or not, whether you become a doctor or not, you are still you. And that's not going to change whether you have a doctorate or not. He said something like, with all of your good qualities and all of your, you know, excellent attributes, or, you know, whatever. And it was absolutely what I needed to hear, because I was so terrified that if I didn't get my PhD, then my whole existence would come crashing to an end. So to hear that from somebody who must have realized what an effect it would have on me, coming from him, somebody who was so eminent, it was great. And I framed that letter, and because I've just moved house, I don't know where it is, but but it's somewhere in a bag or something. It will go up on the wall. It's that important to me. Yeah,
something special to keep. But you are a doctor now. You've got your PhD.
I did.
Have you ever been on a plane and somebody's like having a heart attack and they're like, "Is there a doctor here?" And then
that would be
yes.
No, and that would be the most humbling experience, I think, to be hauled up on a plane only to have to admit to everybody that I don't really have any useful skills to offer anyone. You know, at any time, let alone in a medical emergency on an airplane. So no, it hasn't. And all those stories about, you know, like getting special treatment, if it says doctor in your passport or whatever, like that's happened to me once. So I don't think it really makes much difference. And actually, I kind of think that's right, because, you know, slogging away doing a dissertation like I did for a few years on an extremely obscure period in Egyptian history, you know, to create a piece of work that hardly anybody will ever read, you know, I'm not sure that puts me on, that gives me any sort of special status or anything. So I do use the title, obviously. I say I am Dr. Chris and everything, but yeah. It qualifies me to know a lot about that one thing, but not to be useful in really many other ways, any other ways.
Yeah. I see Paul Harrison here. He says, you can help 1,000 years after you die, though.
Hi, Paul. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. There's got to be some way of turning all that labor into something useful, right? Paul has a PhD as well. He's already figured out how to be useful.
But you have turned it into something useful. I mean, you've written a couple of books already now. Which of your books is your favorite?
Oh, that's a really good question. I should probably say the new one, because I'm supposed to be promoting it at the moment.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, my first book, Searching for Lost Tombs, was that I sort of feel like that was still my best idea, really. You know, I used my best idea up first time round, thinking that that was maybe the only chance I was ever going to have to write a book. So
no, I think come out with a bang. I think that's the
yeah.
best way to do it.
Well, you know, the challenge now is to have some more good ideas, which hopefully I have already had and will continue to have. And yeah, we'll see. But I do have a soft spot for Lost Themes because it took me a very long time to do it as well. I was very, very late submitting it. From commission to publication was nearly 5 years, and that's too long, really. There was a long time when I just didn't do anything on it at all. And again, a bit like with my PhD, I suppose there was a time when I thought maybe I'm never going to do this. So I've got to the end and got it out, and I was if it doesn't sound too sort of cocky and proud to say it, well, by the time it came out, I was pleased with it. So yeah, that was nice. That was a nice feeling.
You should be proud. Your newest book, Egyptologist Notebooks,
yes,
it's literally just been released. It looks amazing. I'm still struggling to get it because of the post here in South Africa. So
I'll send you one. So it really has only just come out. So yeah, I don't actually know which parts of the world have copies yet. There was a US edition, so I know there are copies in North America. I gather they've been reaching Australia, which is great. But Thames and Hudson has a US office. There is a US version published by Getty Publications. Thames and Hudson has an Australian office as well. I don't think they have a South African office yet. That's something to try and resolve, I think.
They don't, but I have bought a couple Thames and Hudson books.
Oh, you have? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they do send here. I had an interesting thing that happened. It was the Thames and Hudson. It was also like similar to yours with a collection of the old explorers' drawings. And I saw it in the bookstore and I said, oh, I'd like to buy that. They said, well, we're holding it for another person who's actually studying Egyptology. So you can come tomorrow at 9 p.m. and get it if they haven't bought it. I was there at 5 to 9. The person wasn't there. At 9 o'clock, I said, is this my book now? So...
Great, good. So you got it, and
I got
it. Was it?
It's got Nefertiti.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway, Thames and Hudson, great publisher and great books.
Exactly.
Don't I?
But don't you just love the old explorers' drawings of the sites?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. And I couldn't have been sort of happier and more grateful to have the opportunity to do a book like this, really, especially with a publisher like Thames and Hudson, which is fundamentally an art book publisher. Actually, that's their real speciality. So they were the perfect publisher in some ways to do a book that it has to be really visual like this. But I mean, obviously, by the time I started working at the Egypt Exploration Society, which is 20 years ago in January, if you can believe that. A long time ago now. I already had an interest in ancient Egypt, and I had a couple of degrees in Egyptology by that point. But I didn't really know so much about the history of Egyptology. But the EES, of course, has a very rich history of its own, and it has this incredible archive. And when I was first working there, it's a little bit different now, but when I was first working there, maybe between half a dozen to a dozen archival paintings made by people like Howard Carter were hanging on the walls, or in some cases just propped up against desks, decorating the office. And I couldn't quite believe that these artifacts relating to people like Carter, who was already a bit of a hero, I think, of mine by this point, would be just, there in the place where I worked. And over the years, I got to to know the archive better and better. And I mean, I still only really scratched the surface in the 16 years I worked there. But it did give me a sort of strong sense of how important archives can be, but also how beautiful the drawings can be in their own right. So I think there's lots of layers to it, really. I mean, they are very beautiful. They are just very beautiful objects. And Thames and Hudson were, I didn't need to persuade anybody at Thames and Hudson about that. They were really, they recognized that very early on. And they were very clear about things like the way that the images should be presented. So they were very keen, for example, that images shouldn't be cropped. So if a painting or a sketch was on a piece of paper that had torn edges, tatty torn edges, or like, you know, the remains of an old metal clip through it or something, that should be included in the book to show the kind of physicality of the object. And that's exactly how, you know, I kind of feel these things should be presented, and they did a great job with that. Yeah,
I saw there was one with like sellotape and things like that, and,
yeah,
and you could actually see the fold of the notebook. I think that looks so good.
yeah. I mean, there's so much that you can say about these things. I mean, in some cases, you know, on a single sheet of paper, you might have the original drawing, yeah, of course. You might have then secondary annotations or whatever, or notes on it. You might also have some kind of markings or labeling relating to the collection it's in now. So the British Library, for example, the British Library papers that are included in the book, most of them are at least labeled in pencil on the corners. In some cases, the collections have a British Museum or British Library stamp on them. Some of the EES things that we included have got, you know, just interesting. There's a notebook, for example, an actual notebook which appears very early on in the book, which has got the brand of notebook that they use, but it's also got the stamp of the expedition that it related to, and then it's got a later archive reference on it. And you can spot, it's almost like the history of the EES archives on it, you know, on a single piece of paper. It's great. There's so much more we could have said about so many of these things, actually. They're sort of, you know, layers of history.
Yeah, but I mean, even those stamps, that is adding to the history of it.
Yeah.
So quite amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, just like archaeological sites and monuments have a lifetime that extends way beyond that initial moment when a tomb was built or a temple was built or whatever. These archives are the same. They have a lifetime like that. And that comes, I hope that comes across in the book.
Which explorer in the book did you find the most interesting, and which one would you have liked to have traveled with?
Wow, that's a great question. Wow. So I suppose that in answer to the first one, who did I find the most interesting? I think I find it difficult not to say Robert Hay, but I'm aware as well that Hay almost haunts the whole book for me, in that his archive was one of the first that I looked at, and it kind of caused me to revise my expectations for the whole book, because I knew a little bit about Hay and I knew a little bit about his collection, but I just wasn't prepared for the scale of it, and the quality of it. So in other words, there were literally hundreds of drawings in the Hay archive, made by Hay, but also by other painters who worked for him, and artists and architects who worked for him. I mean, we could have filled several books this size over with Hay material alone. And although his material has been incorporated into the Egyptological literature, so it's been known and used to that extent, most of the drawings themselves have not been published, which is kind of staggering, really, because he went to such lengths to create this body of work and just never got it together to publish for one reason or another. So
what's your next?
Sorry, go on.
There's your next project.
Well, funnily enough, there is a friend of mine who's doing a PhD at the University of Southampton. Gemma Renshaw is a specialist in Robert Hay's life and work. So I was actually a bit nervous about doing this book, knowing that she's, you know, the current sort of leading expert on the subject. But she's been very nice about it, thankfully. But it's kind of over to her, I think. Actually, I mean, there really is a book on Hay. There is a biography. A biography was published by a guy called Selwyn Tillett in the 80s, but it was a kind of limited run thing. It's not very widely available. It hardly contained any illustrations. Certainly not reproduced in a way that do the originals justice. So there is a book there. I think it's probably just for somebody else to write it.
Well, you guys can collaborate.
Yeah, maybe.
So who would you have traveled with?
Oh yes, sorry, yes. So well, I think if I could pluck up the courage, I think I would want to travel with, of the characters in the book, either George Sands, Frederick Norden, or Richard Pocock, who are three of the first four characters in the book, and they're the earliest three in the book to have actually visited Egypt. The other one of the four never did. So they were visiting Egypt at a time when it was really very, very little known. And, you know, that bit, you know, more untouched. That's an inelegant way of putting it. But it's not, their accounts are kind of magical because of the sense that they were among the very first people, the very first Europeans to travel to these places. And they did so with almost no prior knowledge of what they were going to see, at least of what the situation was on the ground, as it were. They had the Bible and classical accounts, but they didn't have any more recent accounts of what they were going to see. And it's sometimes at the same time, so the accounts are magical, but also at the same time, it's sometimes quite difficult to know what they were looking at. It's quite difficult to recognize those things. They don't use the same names for sites and monuments that we do now necessarily. Sorry?
They couldn't read hieroglyphs, so that made it more difficult as well.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I'd kind of love to go along with them just to see what they were seeing. And, you know, when they were going to places like Saqqara, as they did, it's, I think, clear in all three cases, and able to enter tombs and other monuments which are either now lost to us or were subsequently lost and only rediscovered by excavators later on, you know, just to go and see. And this would be at a time when a lot of these tombs and things were still full of all the burial equipment that they would have contained. You know, I'd just love to have seen what they saw, I think.
But I also know that you are very knowledgeable and very passionate about Nubia. How did Nubia capture your imagination?
Well, thanks. That's very kind of you. It's partly by a sort of accident, actually. So when I was at Birmingham University, my main supervisor, Tony Lee, he was a specialist in First Millennium Egypt, and particularly the Libyan period and the Kushite 25th dynasty. And during my final year, he was working his way through First Millennium history in the lecture series that I was attending. And he had got to the 25th dynasty at a certain point in the year, just before applications for master's degrees and funding for master's degrees had to go in. And for those applications, you needed to give an indication of what research you would like to undertake. And I had literally just been to a lecture about the 25th dynasty, and I was really intrigued by the idea that a group of Egyptianized foreigners from what is now Sudan could take over Egypt and rule it as good and proper Egyptian kings, even though they were foreign. I'd never come across this, I think, until that point, and I just found it really interesting. And it's a nice little discrete, fairly short-lived period of Egyptian history when everything is sort of got this slightly different, distinctive character to it. And building on that, you know, I got to know, of course, that the Kushites had their own homeland where they were building Egyptianizing monuments, Egyptian monuments in kind of in the Egyptian style, but with their own unique twist on them. And this is comparatively little known, you know, for every you know, everybody knows kind of Egypt to some extent pretty well. Kush is much less well known, I think it's fair to say. And so I guess that's always intrigued me. And, you know, I think to some extent we're always looking for the opportunities for, you know, to learn about something that is kind of new and different and interesting. And I've also had the opportunity to travel to Sudan to see the monuments in person a couple of times in the last few years, and it's a really, really beautiful place. The monuments are incredibly beautiful, and there's just a lot to learn. I feel like there's a lot for me to learn still, for sure, about Kush in particular. So that really appeals.
Yeah. Well, I hope you do more exploring in Nubia, in Sudan. I'd love to.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So I have been told, and there's this belief that Egyptologists are boring, book clenching, like know-it-alls. We don't really do exciting things. I've done a little bit of Googling.
Mm.
And
yeah.
I have a picture I need to show you, and I need to know what is going on here.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that I could just try and
interesting look.
I could try and deny that's me, I suppose, but assuming that's not going to work. So that was taken during the filming of a documentary. A documentary the BBC was making about Flinders Petrie. And
okay, the man who discovered Egypt.
The man who discovered Egypt, quite right, yes. And so you will probably know, but maybe the people listening don't know. The story is, Petrie is this great, legendary archaeologist who introduced new standards of recording and a comprehensive approach to archaeology in Egypt. He wasn't the only person doing this, but he was one of the leading influences in archaeological method and standards in the late 19th century onwards. And he worked very rapidly and thoroughly at sites all over Egypt and eventually into what was then Palestine as well. But he was a bit of an eccentric, and he was determined at all costs to get on with his work. And he worked at Giza. That was the very first place in Egypt that he worked, which is where that photograph was taken. Yes. Just in the kind of shadow of the pyramid of Khafra, the second pyramid. And what he used to do, he used to get bothered by tourists, basically, you know, wondering what he was doing, and he didn't really like this. He wanted to just be left alone and go on with his work. So for that reason, and also because it was very hot, he used to strip down to his flesh-coloured underwear, thinking, you know, first of all, this would be more comfortable for him, but also secondly, from any distance, it would look to people as though he didn't have anything on, and that would totally put them off. So he never got bothered. So when we were making this documentary, the producer decided that it would be a great idea for me to tell this story wearing the flesh, as close as the BBC costume department could get to the flesh-coloured underwear that Petrie would have had on at the time, which turns out to be a kind of pink onesie, kind of jumpsuit thing. This was when I think about this now, it seems kind of funny in that the producer said to me at the time, "This is what people will remember," and you know, and we're lined up to do 2 or 3 weeks worth of filming in Egypt, Israel, and in London, well, in various places in the UK. And she said, and this is my first big TV thing, and she said, "This is what people will remember." And it's amazing that all these years later, nearly 10 years later, she was absolutely right. It is what people remember, and it's what I get asked about more than anything else, or what people remark on more than anything else. And that is great. I mean, it's, you know, I'm not that kind of person that, you know, doesn't appreciate a sense of humor and a sense of fun is actually a really important and good way of engaging an audience. So if
Exactly.
if people watch the program because they thought that was funny, or if people carried on watching because of that and learned something about Petrie, then that's really great. The other thing that I got to say that just seems so funny about it is that was literally my first ever day of location filming in Egypt, and I don't know how many more days I've done of that kind of thing since then. But that first day, I had to dress up. I had to get changed out of my normal clothes into that suit behind a big rock on the Giza Plateau. So I had to get changed into that and then change back into my normal clothes. I had to do those sequences. That photograph was taken sort of spontaneously. They just said, "Look, Chris, can you take a photo?" So I put like an idiot, I put my foot up on a rock and did a stupid pose. And earlier on in that day, I had done a piece to camera while riding on the back of a donkey. And so, of course, at this point, I would have thought, this is just what happens. This is when you do TV, this is what happens. I have never done any of those things since. I've never done any dressing up. I've never ridden an animal before, or since then, for the TV cameras. So that was an extraordinary sort of introduction to TV work. But it's, I guess it's done me quite well. It served me well.
One day I will direct you in a documentary and we'll do some really strange stuff. Okay.
I'll hold you to that. I'll hold you to that. Yeah.
So you've also been doing a lot of online lectures. I've been attending those. Those have been really great. And the online lecturing, it's really, you're welcome. It's really been a great way for people to connect, even though we're all, different in different continents. And I think for yourself, I mean, you are giving so much information and your time to other people. It's so great. Do you enjoy doing those lectures? How do you feel about them?
Yeah, no, I really do. I really do. It's been a really interesting experience. I mean, obviously the last few months has been very tough. I feel very lucky because I was working from home anyway. So that didn't involve much of a change for me. I feel very lucky because the research for Egyptologist Notebooks was done. And in fact, my work on the text was done by the time London went into lockdown. Had the pandemic struck 6 months earlier, then the book would have just ground to a halt because I needed to physically be in libraries and archives to do the work. So I feel very grateful that was done. And yeah, I mean, what's been sort of, strange, but also really great about the whole online lecturing thing is that the technology was always there, or it's been there for a long time. But I had never done a lecture online at all until the EES invited me to do one. The EES was ahead of the game. Carl Groves and Stephanie Boonstra were the sort of Egyptology pioneers, or at least in my, as far as I know anyway. So I owe it to them to kind of have got me going doing this. But for many reasons, it's been almost better than lecturing in person. I miss the actual being able to meet people. Obviously, I miss traveling around. I used to travel around the UK and in some cases beyond to give talks. I miss that. But on the flip side, as you say, I mean, I can reach with an online lecture a bigger number of people in a greater diversity of parts of the world, which has been incredible. And it just never dawned on me. I feel a bit stupid about this now, but it never dawned on me that there would be so many people around the world who just couldn't get to not just my talks or talks that are in the UK, but just any Egyptology talks, who now suddenly, thanks to the phenomenon of online lectures, can get to loads of stuff, a whole variety of things, and it seems like it's been really popular. And so to have so many people be so grateful and interested and pleased has been really great. And on the other side of things, for me, obviously, it's kept me busy. It's helped to get through the lockdown. Yeah. It's helped me to continue to be in touch with people, which has been really nice. And it's also, I will admit, it's helped me to up my game, because I'm aware that, you know, every time I do a lecture now, anybody could be watching, you know, whereas I admit in the past, on some level, I would be aware that if I'm going to do a talk in this place, there's probably not going to be anybody X, Y, and Z who I might be frankly scared of giving a talk to. Whereas, you know, now it could be anyone. And, you know, and occasionally very esteemed colleagues are in the audience of these things. And that has the effect of making me think, you know, excuse my French, shit, I better be on top of this here. You know, my slides have got to be good and my information's got to be good, and I've got to make sure I refer to my sources properly. So quite honestly, I'm doing I'm doing better lectures online than I would have been before, I think. Yeah, so yeah, I feel very grateful to have had the opportunity to do it, and it's been fun, and long may it continue, I think. Although I'm going to run out of ideas at some point, I guess.
No, I'm really enjoying them. You know, they've really given me so many hours of great enjoyment. So if anyone wants to watch your lectures, they can go over to chrisnaunton.com, go to online lectures, and they can find them there.
They can. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, always. It's just lovely to hear. I know that you've been to so many of them, and it's another thing I should say is that you know, you and I weren't really in touch before all this, and there's been a number of people that I've kind of come to know through this, and you know, there's always 5 or 10 minutes before a talk or at the end of a talk when you can just have a chat, and actually, like I was saying, I do really miss meeting people and traveling to different parts of the UK to give talks. But it suddenly dawned on me not long ago that often actually before a talk, I might meet, say, the organising committee, but then there's usually a moment when 5 minutes or so where I'm sort of standing at the front waiting for the talk to start and just not talking to anybody. Whereas online, you know, there's constant chat. It's great. I often start late, as you will know, Curtis. Because I've forgotten where I am and I'm just too busy talking to people. It's great. It's been lovely.
Yeah. Well, Sophia, Aziz, and I, we always text after your lectures and discuss. So even after your lecture has ended, we still have entertainment afterwards. So
that's nice to hear. Sophia is somebody who I would have in the past had the opportunity to meet at talks. So she's one of the people I'm missing. But it's great. It's you know, it's been nice to be in touch online, and it's great to hear that you guys are you know, are in touch with each other afterwards too. That's nice.
Yeah. So tell me, what discovery would you still like to see made within your lifetime?
Ooh. Wow. Well, it's a bit difficult to talk in terms of finding things we don't know for sure are out there. But also actually another thought here is, and I thought a lot about this when I was writing my Lost Tombs book. Look, Searching for the Lost Tombs of Egypt is a whole book about things that might or might not exist, which is a strangely difficult subject to write about in some ways, because you're constantly just saying it might be and it might not. And the other thing about it, I realized when I first started to write it, is that if anybody finds one of these tombs, then I'm sunk. I'm going to have to tear a chapter out of the book. And for somebody just embarking on their first book, that was quite a scary thought. So with all of that in mind, and the fact that I do think that to some extent not knowing about things is actually more compelling than knowing about them, if the tomb of Pharaoh Ankeperu-Re Meri Neferkeperu-Re Nefer Aten Nefertiti were found, and if, as some people believe, it is found intact, although, like I say, I think something would be lost in knowing about it rather than not knowing about it. That would be sensational, you know. I think that's the sort of big one. From a personal point of view, there is a monument in Alexandria which I'm pretty sure still exists, but I'm not 100% sure about. And I've just been working on this for the last few weeks and months. And I haven't had a chance to go and check this out on the ground yet because I haven't been able to go to Egypt for a few months. And I'm not going to tell you what it is because I'm still writing about it. But when it comes out, you'll know. So there's a monument in Alexandria which, if it turns out to exist, isn't going to be a sensational discovery because I suspect most people won't care about it. But for me personally, if I were able to go to Alexandria next week, jump in a taxi, go a little way down the coast, get my taxi driver to park me in the right place, and go wandering out across what looks like a kind of industrial site to just see if this thing still exists and is there. And if it is, if you can walk around it and get to see it, that would be the best. That would be amazing for me. But
well, if you do find something, let me know. I will be on the next plane there, and I will come and film you.
Great. There's a blog post coming. There's a very long blog post about it coming.
I'm very much looking forward to one of those. So, what does Susanna think about, Susanna, your wife? What does she think about all this Egyptology stuff?
I think she thinks it's quite a good thing. Yeah, she did. When we first met, she didn't know what Egyptology was, and I think that's probably quite a healthy and good thing because, sometimes it's a bit easy to get sort of slightly wrapped up in the subject, and so it's good to be grounded in the real world, and be reminded that for some people, it's just not important at all. But yeah, I think she thinks it's good. She's been to Egypt. Once we went to Egypt together. We were actually supposed to be in Egypt together in April this year, but it didn't happen. So yeah, and we did. When she came to Egypt, we had, I think, something like 6 days of seeing things, so really not very much time at all. But I deliberately tried to do unusual things, and we both had a really good time. Things that are slightly outside my comfort zone. So it was kind of stuff that was a bit new for both of us, less new for me, but still we had a great time. I think she likes it. Yeah.
Chris, you're basically one of the most recognizable Egyptologists out there. I mean, you cannot switch on like the History Channel, Nat Geo, Discovery, whatever, without your face popping up on the screen somehow.
Yeah.
How do you feel about sort of being like an Egyptology rock star, that people actually recognize you?
Well, I should say that, again, thanks. That feels like a very that nice thing for you to say. Yeah, I'm sorry if it seems like, oh my God, is he on this as well? Aren't there any other Egyptologists that could be on documentaries?
No, I don't think it is.
Does it have to be always him? Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, if people don't mind that, then that's lovely. I mean, I don't get recognized that much, really. And again, I think that's probably pretty healthy. I've been recognized a couple of times in the Valley of the Kings, in places like that. But let's be clear, I'm not like David Beckham or somebody like that. So it's that kind of a nice level. People generally are nice when I meet them. Nobody's yet come up to me and said, I wish that you would just not be on telly so much. Yeah, it's nice. I feel very lucky to have been able to do TV at all because I enjoy it, I do, and I think it's part of the way I got interested in ancient Egypt myself, just watching documentaries on TV. So to have been able to go from, being on the, somebody who enjoyed those things to somebody who gets to play a small part in making them is really great.
Yeah. Well, I was shooting a documentary with Sharon Haig and Mary Allison. And by that time, I had already released on YouTube a couple documentaries. And we were at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. And literally everyone was mobbing me. And I was so happy that Sharon was there because she literally just grabbed me and like shouted at everyone like, "Go away." It was so crazy.
Well,
So
I don't have, I've never really had that. I've never been mobbed. So no.
well,
I
if you
don't,
do get
I
mobbed,
wouldn't
have
deal with it
Sharon.
very well. Sorry.
If you do get mobbed, have Sharon there.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. That's good to know. I don't think I'm ever going to be in that position, but
Oh, I see Jessica's online. Jessica's from Italy. She's a budding Egyptologist. Hi, Jessica.
hi,
We chat
Jessica.
quite often. So I see that Instagram usually ends these videos after about an hour. They just suddenly end with like no warning.
Okay.
So I am going to start with some of the quick fire questions, but I'm not sure how we're going to get through them. And then if we have time, if you would like to come back and we can answer a couple questions just for maybe 15 minutes or so from some of the audience members, that would be great.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. So you want me to be
Okay.
really quick here, really quick fire, one word?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'll do my best.
Okay. Favorite place in Egypt?
The Theban Hills.
Mm-hmm. Favorite artifact?
Pass.
Pass.
No, that's a terrible answer. The solid gold innermost coffin of Tutankhamun. It's ridiculous.
Good. Favorite pharaoh?
Pianki of the 25th dynasty.
Mm-hmm. Favorite queen?
Nefertiti.
Nefertiti.
Yes.
Favorite place apart from Egypt?
Ireland.
Interesting. Tutankhamun or Cleopatra?
Tutankhamun.
Good. Jessica, favorite Egyptian food?
Shish taouk, chicken kebab.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then sort of a quick fire question, but not too much of a quick fire question. What advice would you give to someone starting out in Egyptology?
Remember that you're doing it for the love of it. Don't get too hung up on what you think it is, rather than what it actually is. Always do what it is you love, and don't get too hung up on the idea of becoming an Egyptologist. You know, if you get dragged off to do something slightly to one side that's related to that, that's totally fine. As long as you're doing what you want to do and you love doing, that's great. I don't know if that's good advice or not, but I like we were saying at the very beginning of this, I always just tried to do what interested in me and I enjoyed. And there were moments when I thought to myself, you know, this bit of Egyptology I'm not enjoying. What's going on? I don't know what to do here. Am I going to have to do this thing that I don't like forever because I really want to do Egyptology and I'm not sure I like it anymore? And I kind of moved sideways, or I moved away, and I've always found my way back. But yeah, don't be afraid to make changes, and even if they're changes that make it look like you're going to go and do something else. I hope that's good enough advice.
It's very good advice. Very good advice. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to end the call, and then I will start a new live.
Okay.
And then we'll come back, answer a couple questions. Yes, okay. So I see Jessica still has a question, but Jessica, come back in a minute or so and ask it then.
Okay, cool.
Okay, see you in a sec.
Yep.
Bye. Okay. Hi again.
I've put my phone down this time, so I'm going to try not to move so much.
Okay, so you won't be like sleeping like Ramses with like the one arm up tonight.
No, hopefully not. Not now. No, I've got my arm in exercise. Yeah.
Yeah. So if any of you guys have questions for Chris, which I'm sure you do, please ask them now. I remember Jessica had a question, but we ended too quickly and disappeared within the chat. Troy, hi. So a question I had was actually, which is your favorite mummy?
Golly gosh. So actually, the elder lady from Cave 35. If it's allowable to have a favorite mummy, I love the fact that the mummy was discovered in such unusual circumstances, unwrapped, lying side by side with two other individuals, also unwrapped. It's pretty much beyond now that she's the wife of Amenhotep, and the mother of Akhenaten, the grandmother of Tutankhamun.
Yes.
You know, etc., as you know, and she's so well preserved. Yeah.
Can I let you in on a secret?
Hmm.
I've literally just done a reconstruction of Queen T based off of her mummy.
Ooh.
So I'll be putting that out on Friday.
Oh, great. Great.
I'll send it to you.
You chose a great mummy to use as the basis for that. Yeah. Really. One of the most beguiling mummies to have survived, I think.
So Nico asked about the search for Cleopatra's tomb by Kathleen Martinez.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm lucky enough to have been to the site at a number of occasions now. The first two times I went, I was there with Kathleen. Yeah, and I had a great opportunity to chat with her and to talk through her ideas. It's a really interesting site. I'm still not convinced that the tomb is there. I'm not convinced that there's really any good reason to think. To be honest, I'm yet to be convinced that there was ever any good reason to think there. That's not to say that Kathleen isn't right. The tomb of Cleopatra could be there. You know, who knows? And she might yet find it. And she's clearly very determined. You know, has been excavating this site and knows it far better than I do now. For of course, for a number of years. But all of the evidence that I'm aware of suggests that Cleopatra was buried. She prepared a tomb in Alexandria and was buried in it. And that was part of the royal palace of Alexandria. And I can't see evidence suggests that the tomb.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I see.
Pleased about that.
Jay wants to know: do you think there are any undiscovered tombs in the Valley of the Kings?
That's a good question. Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. Yes, I think it's likely that there are tombs we haven't found yet. Whether they will be anything, whether they will contain anything, whether they will be, you know, decorated monuments which were used to receive the burial of important individuals, such as kings. And let's not forget that we're still missing the burials of at least 2 New Kingdom pharaohs, whose tombs we might expect to have been there, Thutmose and Ramesses. And also, you know, any number of other members of the royal families of that time who might have been buried there. It's at least possible that there will be other half-finished, unfinished, small monuments used for this or that, caches such as KV6. So, are there any tombs to be found? Yes, I think there's a good chance there are.
Yeah. Photo Gogia wants to know who is your favorite female character throughout history?
Again, so my answer to the question, who's my favorite Egyptian queen, was Nefertiti, and I think that would be my answer again. I'm partly interested in the character. I'm partly interested in the history, and it seems very likely, as I'm sure you will, of course, know, Curtis. Lots of people listening will know. It's very likely Nefertiti, the great royal wife of Akhenaten, became pharaoh in her own right. But the sort of memory of that was suppressed deliberately. And
I was not convinced that she had become a pharaoh, but your lecture actually convinced me.
Oh, really? Oh, that's that's nice. Thank you.
You put the information out so well, and it was like.
Well, thanks. I mean, in that lecture, I was really just pulling together arguments made by lots of other people and evidence presented by lots of other people. When I wrote Lost Tombs, and I wrote a chapter about the Amana Royals, Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and Co., I knew I was going to include that in the book because it's such an obvious, great book for people. But I also knew that I was going to have to be really on my game because there are so many people that know so much about that period. But I was also really looking forward to the opportunity to getting to grips with all that. It is very complicated. And actually, I think when I gave that lecture, that was maybe the point at which I had got familiar enough with the material myself. I'd kind of felt like I'd got on top of it myself enough that I could explain my take on the situation. So if it was comprehensible and it made you change your own ideas, I'm very pleased.
Amira Riyad, le francophone Egyptologue, she has a question. Do you like the idea about putting mummies in the museums?
So I suppose Amira is asking, in general, should mummies be on display in museums? Well, it's a contentious for some people, isn't it? I think if it's done sensitively, by
respectfully,
absolutely, then I think it's acceptable. It doesn't offend me, but I feel like this is a story that isn't going to have a sort of isn't going to just be resolved forever. I feel as though people's ideas around this change. So in the same way as it was acceptable at one point to have live events where ancient mummies were unwrapped before the public, which we would now consider to be quite dignified. Same way that's changed, it may well be that in the future, what we consider to be acceptable now, which by and large is mummies display but covered up between the sort of neck and ankles, it may be that even that is unacceptable in the future. Who knows? Myself, I feel that's the right way of doing it. Yeah.
But they need better cases. The mummy of Queen T, the last time I was there, I was looking at her mummy, and I remember her hair was very well attached to her head. And I saw there were people walking up and they were bumping the case, and her whole body was like shaking.
Yeah.
And I was looking, and as I was watching, literally a part of her scalp flipped up.
Yeah. I mean, it goes without saying that human remains, mummified human remains, are very fragile, and it's very important that they are kept in conditions in which they can be preserved. And if cases don't allow for that, then they shouldn't be on display. That's worrying. Yeah, that's worrying.
Jessica asks, are there any good online Egyptology courses of a medium level? If so, which ones do you suggest?
I'm not sure how to answer that, actually. There are a number of courses around. In terms of formal study, there's a massive amount of sort of continuing education. So, non-degree level Egyptology around. The University of Manchester runs a very, very good program at various levels. I don't have all the details, but I would suggest trying the University of Manchester online Egyptology. That's kind of the gold standard. I think that's probably about as good as it gets. There are lots of other things around. I just don't. I'm just on top of all the details myself. But I would suggest maybe start there, and then I don't know. Maybe one for the community. It is for me. Do people have courses they're on? That might be more useful than what I recommend. Sorry, that's not a very good answer. Sorry.
Okay, so I just want to say, Christy69, thank you for the compliment there. And I see Mr. Darcy has a question. Mr. Darcy wants to know how much of ancient Amarna is covered by today's city?
So there's not really a city there as a modern city. It's really a series of villages which are more or less sort of connected to one another, that run along the edge of the ancient city, for the most part on the river side. I don't know this, and the guys who work at Amarna, the team, would have a better sense of this than I do. My is that probably not more than 10 to 20 of the ancient city has been encroached upon. But yeah, it's difficult to say. But the other thing is that even in parts of the ancient city which have been covered as such, things have still been lost. In that, you know, the brick and stone remains of buildings have been removed for one reason or another. The ground plan of the city is substantially still intact, I think. Most of it is still there. I think that's probably fair to say. But it's a problem. It's a problem.
Mary Allison wants to know, do you think Akhenaten was murdered?
No. I mean, we just can't know that. But I don't. You know, as good, you know, scientific archaeologists, we have to proceed from what evidence we have, and there isn't any good reason at the moment to think that Akhenaten died of anything other than natural causes. We can speculate that, you know, there might be something else going on, but there's no evidence for it. So just purely on that basis, I think we have to say, you know, he probably just died of natural causes, and he would probably have been of a good age, a good enough age, that we don't need to think that, oh, this is.
Yeah. I see Paul says something about that guy on eBay offered us that map, remember? I'm not quite sure what that means.
It was a guy, I didn't, yeah, Paul's right. Paul put a tweet about not long ago, which he and I had a quite amusing exchange about on Twitter. I didn't look at it that closely, but somebody on eBay was selling something that sort of purported to be. It was like, but you know, buy this thing on eBay, and I'll tell you where the tomb of such and such is buried. It was a strange. Like, this guy has a secret. He was selling the secret or something.
I get that all the time.
Yeah, I bet you do. Yeah.
Where is this artifact from? And I'm like, that's a fake.
Yeah.
Urska Kim asks, what do you think about the Grand Egyptian Museum? Have you visited it?
Oh, good question. I haven't been inside. I've been to the site on a number of occasions. So in around, let's say, 2012 to about 2016, I visited several occasions, basically to see the building site as the building was going up. But in the last year or so, it's been possible to actually go inside the building completely, to the extent that it's possible to go inside. I was at a conference in Cairo in November last year, And all the delegates were invited to visit the museum to have a tour of the inside. And unfortunately, well, I count myself lucky to have been able to do it anyway, but I had to fly to Sudan today, so I missed the tour.
Oh.
Well, I mean, as you probably know, the museum was due to open this year. And then that's now been put back because of the pandemic. So, but I mean, I think it's almost ready. So I'm excited. I expect the next opportunity I'll get, the museum will actually go. So that's exciting.
We hope so. I mean, Salima said on Sunday, 2022, which I almost like threw my laptop across the room. So.
Well, that's a year later than I had been given to expect. Salima's information, I'm sure, is better than mine, but yeah, I mean, it's so close now. Yeah, it's for many years it wasn't even clear when it was ever going to be built, and for many years nothing happened. But for at least 6 or 7 years now, a lot has been happening. But there's no question it's going to, and it will be beyond anything we have ever seen before. Will be amazing, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think we'll take 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up. I don't want to keep you too long. I'm sure, like, Susanna's in the background, like, Chris, hang up. I want to cook dinner.
I have to cook the dinner tonight. It's my turn, and I bought far too many sausages from our local butcher the other day, so I have to get going.
Okay. Okay, so we'll answer Troy. Troy wants to know, do you think we maybe lost any important kings or queens when the Victorians unwrapped mummies at their parties?
That's not impossible. That's not impossible. You may know the story. Of course, we can't know. We can't know what we've lost. And mummies, by the way, are very, very difficult to identify once they've been separated from any other in the burial. So if we know the identity of a mummy, it's usually because we found it in a coffin with the name on or something like that. So, taken out of tombs, separated from coffins and other inscribed material, and then unwrapped separately, we could have no knowledge where they came from or who they are. So who knows what we might have lost. There is, though, just one great story that this reminds me of, which is that a mummy was purchased by, I think, a Scottish doctor in the late 19th century. And this mummy eventually made its way to a museum in Niagara. You may know this story already, Curtis. Eventually,
he has a red beard. Am I correct?
No, not particularly. No, I don't think so. But you may be remembering that certain features of the mummy, and of course it was more or less forgotten in Niagara. It wasn't in an Egyptology museum, a museum of curiosity. But once it was spotted by Egyptologists, much more recently, more like 20 years ago, they recognised that this was almost certainly a royal mummy, thanks to the pose and various other features, and they began to wonder who this was. And tracing back the history of the discovery, they realized that the mummy had been bought ultimately from the Abd al-Rasul family, who had discovered a cache of mummified New Kingdom kings. And we know that they were selling things gradually on the market, and that this doctor had requested mummy. So by process of deduction, we now understand that mummy that was in Niagara. The suggestion is but the suggestion is that it's the mummy from Ramesses I, who's missing from that list of kings from the 2 caches. So that was a kind of near miss, if you like. And it is also true that there are other New Kingdom mummies. Most of those mummies have been recovered, and we've got them thanks to those 2 caches. But a couple of others are missing. So, for example, Ai and Horemheb are both missing. Could they have been sold? Are they in the basement somewhere? Were they unwrapped? Were they destroyed? Did we find them? Who knows?
Yeah. Final question. We'll take it quick from Rachel. Do you believe that the unguent cones were actually fragrant or merely symbolic?
Hi, Rachel Ann. Rachel Ann is a friend and family.
Oh. We
Very.
also said hi to Susanna earlier on, so.
So to the question, and also Rachel Ann is a specialist in this kind of thing. Rachel Ann, you probably know that not very long ago, about a year or two ago, for the first time, an actual mummified individual was discovered with an incense cone on their heads, and this was the first time that something like this has been found. So Rachel Ann will know, and lots of other people will know, that it's very common for the deceased to be depicted in iconography with an incense cone on the head, and these are made of incense mixed with wax. And we believe what happened is that these were then melted into the wig or whatever of the for the fragrance. But we had no evidence that they until this mummy was found with an incense cone on its head, proving that they really did do this. Whether or not they were fragrant, I don't know. And I guess we would need to wait for the Amana project. It was the brilliant Amana project found them to analyze the chemicals and then do some reconstruction. I don't think it would be a good idea to try and melt the actual cone, but test it for the properties and then have a go. And then who knows, maybe be selling Amana incense fragrance in the future. That would be fun.
Exactly. We'll get Sophia to scan it and figure it out for us.
Right, exactly. Yes, Sophia is the person for sure. Yeah. And Rachel Ann, when we come to visit you, we were supposed to be doing that right around now, but we can't. When we come to visit you, hopefully by that time, all the research will be done properly. But anyway, hi for now.
Anyway, thank you so much, Chris. And you also need to come to South Africa with Susanna when all of this is over.
We would love to do that. Yeah, we would love to do. Yes, please.
Yes. Anyway, thank you so much. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for your time, for answering everyone's questions. And I hope that you have a fantastic evening, and we will chat soon. Looking forward to your next lecture, part 2, Egyptologist Notebooks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Curtis. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks everybody out there for listening. It's been really good fun. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Bye.